In today's podcast, we are delighted to have with us former American NFL football linebacker. He played football for the Tampa Bay. He also played college football at Taft College and Forum College. Today, we will unpack a little of his experiences, his story, in his own words, because your experience is your story. Welcome, Milton Thornhill. Really glad that you were able to join me in this podcast.
Thanks for
Uh,
having
Yes, and I know one other thing is when we see athletes on a whole, majority of the people really see the beginning and the end. They really
me.
don't see what happened in the middle. And so you will have a chance to really tell us a little bit about your past experience. But before we get to all of that, we just want to start with a little bit about your childhood. Describe your childhood for us. You know, your younger years of growing up in, I think it's in North Carolina, you would say, right?
No, I was born in actually I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia. And it's known as Jerry Falwell country, and that's a true railroad city. And what I mean by that is the population to this day is pretty much the same. The railroad pretty much divides the city in half. You have back then when I was younger, it was whites on one side, blacks on the other side. Now it's more affluent. You have some blacks on the other side of the track, but the majority is still whites and blacks split right down the middle of the city. And then I later moved to North Carolina because my mother married a gentleman that was in the military, and so it just kind of took us to North Carolina and back here. But I was raised by a single mom with the help of my godmother and god grandmother. And it's funny because I was just talking to my kids about my childhood. I've since come to appreciate my childhood. When you're going through some of this, you don't really pay attention. But one of the things that was real special about my childhood is that, again, I was raised by a single mother. But the one thing that was unique for me is I have seven aunts, two uncles, and in my age group, I was the only boy. So I was always surrounded by girls.
Oh yeah.
And then when I was with my uh, my god grandmother and my godmother, I was always the youngest. So I was always the youngest kid with the older crowd, bunch of boys, and so either I kept up or they left me behind. So I was always a kid that was kind of tagging along with everybody. And I think what started to happen is I had to either stay home or fend for myself. And so, it was just one of them childhoods where everybody started noticing that I was a little bit different. I was very quick. I was very agile. Whenever people would try to grab me and do stuff, I was strong enough to get away, fast enough to get away from them, side to side, very shifty kid. And, we just turned into a game. So, all the big boys, they wanted to kind of pick you up and throw you around, but they never could do that to me, and
Okay.
and I was just one of those kids, man, that was just kind of always watching from a distance, watching my older cousins, because again, I was a boy that was mostly surrounded by girls. So when I got around my boy cousins, I just would watch, what was different they did and what I was going through, because of course, being girls, it was a different
Different.
environment.
Yeah, different environment. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you recently have this conversation with your kids. And I think that is very good because I don't think a lot of parents tell their kids about their background. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is something that needed. Kids
Mm-hmm.
need to know your background story, where you're coming from, so they can appreciate all the things that they have moving
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I've always appreciated about, just being a father, again, being raised by a single mother. My father was in the picture, but it really wasn't in the picture. He was around. Again, I could talk about childhood, or that was probably, it is because it just kind of, recently rehashed everything. But, I have a great relationship with my kids' friends. And that was one thing that my mom, we were always house that everybody wanted to come hang at. And when I was younger, it was funny because my mom worked all the time. So I was with my god grandmother, most of the time. And I lived in Lynchburg. It's a street called Wise Street. It's still there now, Wise, Wise. And Lynchburg is known as a hill city. So it was at the top of the hill. And my father's family lived at the bottom of the hill. And so when I was young, very young, probably about 5 or 6, I wasn't allowed to go past a certain house. And I could always see my cousins playing. And I couldn't go down there. And so that bothered me a little bit. And then also the house next to me had this huge Great Dane and this beautiful black Doberman Pinscher named Sheba. The Great Dane was named Victor. And I was afraid to go too close to the house because Victor was always chasing other dogs around, pulling fences down. And Sheba was this beautiful female Doberman Pinscher that she was just there, raising all and Sheba was just kind of watching to make sure things didn't get out of control. And then, once the owner came and got everything together, she would just sit on the porch. But I would only go so far. And then as I got older, I could go down. And so I was always a kid that I was always the one that everybody was happy to see. Little Milton, here comes Little Milton. And so, and that kind of went with me throughout my life. Like I said, my mother ended up marrying later on in life. And, it was always pick up, move, insert, press play. I was always a kid that was, and one of the things I appreciate, you hear now where kids say, or you watch movies now where kids are the new kids in town and they're the ones that gets picked on. I never experienced that. I was always a kid that everybody was intrigued by, or I was like, new kid and the cool kid or whatever. And so I made friends quick. And and that's what I tell my friends now. I mean, my kids now is like, look, be a kid that's very open about who you are. Don't let people pick on you. Let people know where you stand right away, and you'll find out who your friends are. Either they're going to leave you alone or they're going to rock with you. And I just believe in that, and I carry myself. But now I'm not looking for friends. I'm not looking for new friends, but I make friends all the time. I could, so.
You talk about Lynchburg, and the name Lynchburg has a connotation to that. I mean,
yes,
Lynchburg.
Yeah. And it's a story out about that. I don't know if it's true or not. And so, I guess do some research on it. But it was said that it was named after somebody was chasing, I don't know if it was a slave or a black man or something, but James River, again, the city comes up right off of the James River, and there's a big bridge that comes from James River that comes, I guess it's Appomattox into Lynchburg or whatever it is. And the story is that, they were, chasing this guy for doing whatever. And as he was going underneath the bridge, they were saying Lynchburg, and so I don't know if that's true or not, but it wouldn't shock me,
that name is, I think I've been down that side once.
Beautiful place, but as is, it's Jerry Falwell country. So, what do you expect? It is what it is.
Well, let's move a little bit into your high school, right?
Yeah.
Which high school did you attend?
I actually attended 2 high schools. I started out in Rushburg High School, which is in Rushburg, Virginia. And then I went to Rushburg very briefly. And it was funny because as an 8th grader, I was allowed to play on the freshman football team for Rushburg. Myself and 2 other kids from the 8th grade, Wayne Buchanan and Danny Davis, outstanding running backs. And so we were selected to play as 8th graders up on the freshman team. And then shortly after the start of my freshman year, I moved to Woodbridge, Virginia. Was supposed to go to Woodbridge High School and ended up moving in with my uncle. And so I ended up going to Potomac High School, which ended up probably being one of the best things ever happened to me. And again, I became the popular kid because when I was at Rushburg, the coach knew that I was moving and he had transferred to Woodbridge and he wanted me to come and play for him. So of course, I was like, cool, I'll come and, we're going to be in that school district. So that was the plan. But then when my mom realized that when we moved in with my aunt, it was my aunt, her husband, and their 2 daughters. She's coming in with 2 kids. It was just too crowded. So we moved in with my uncle, who was single at the time. And I ended up going to Potomac High School, and the coach thought that I, lied to him about what I was doing. So I was the kid.
hopefully
Yeah.
he'll hear this podcast and he will realize.
No, he figured, like, after the first year, we ended up, we actually met on the football field of the actual after the game. And, I explained to him, like, I had to go where my parents wanted me to go. Of course, ended up kicking their butts anyway, but it was, he knew I didn't do it on purpose. At that age, you do what your parents tell you to do,
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you realize that you had actually a passion for football? When did it really click that that you have the potential to do well, or maybe better than some of the other athletes?
Back when I was in Lynchburg with my cousins, they, like I said, I used to hang with them all the time, and they used to try to do stuff to me all the time. So, with those guys, they either played instruments. My cousin was a drummer, and one of his buddies was a bass player. So, they were into other extracurricular activities, but their sport was basketball and dodgeball. So they were always trying to hit me with something or throw the basketball at me. And so one day we were walking, and I believe it was at the YMCA, which I think is still in the same spot. But they took me to this, what I now understood to be a football tryout. And they was like, go out there and run around with those kids, like, go see if they can catch you. So I just went out there and started running around. I had no idea what was going on. Just out there running around. And, you had some guys at the time who, to me, were just like my older cousins, just guys telling kids what to do. And so I was just jumping out there doing it, and ended up leaving. And then I think 2 or 3 days later, someone sent a note to my grandmother, asking me to join the football team. And of course, my grandmother was upset because she had no idea that I'd even tried out.
Yeah.
So it was a big brouhaha about that. And of course, I was told no, but then my cousin snuck me off anyway, and I ended up playing. And it didn't take me long to realize that I had a talent. I just didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't one of those kids that watched football growing up. My mom, like I said, my mom worked a lot. And so I was always outside playing, which today, nobody really does that. But I was outside always doing stuff, and so, but once I got out there, it was just like, who can catch me? The coach would just put the ball in my hand and said, go score. And I'm like, that way? And he's like, yeah. So I knew I had a talent, but I also, I was into martial arts, gymnastics, things of that nature. So I was always a very flexible, agile kid. But football just wasn't something that I watched. I just stumbled into it, I guess. And it was fun for me. It was just fun.
And that was the next question I was going to ask you, if you had played any other sports, but you say you were involved in gymnastics and all that. Okay, so who were some of the people that influenced your decision to play football? Was it the coach that or was it along with some of the athletes, or?
For me, it was my coaches. They definitely saw something in me. I mean, again, when I was playing, I had to borrow stuff from people because my grandmother wasn't having it. So I was playing in different people's shoes, and, the uniforms didn't fit because I didn't pay to play. And so they used to always wrap me up in tape, and the coaches wrote me something. I won an award of the year, and one of the coaches wrote on it, like, keep a roll of tape with you because you're going to break a lot of records on your way. And so, I stayed in youth football for about 2 years there. And then, like I said, my mother married my now deceased stepfather, and we moved to, at that time, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So when we got to Fort Bragg, Fort Bragg was this big old conglomerate of people, and youth sports was big. So it was always this big thing on Saturdays where you go out there and it would have probably 15 to 20 games going on. And, it just became this big spectacle. It's like, you had the cheerleaders, you had the parents, and if you weren't playing, you were watching other games. So it became, at that point, like, you could see all the talent that was around. When you weren't playing, you were watching other teams play. And so at that time, it kind of caught my attention, like, okay, this is something that could be fun,
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. So let's move on to college.
Mm-hmm.
Which college did you attend after high school?
I went to a junior college. I went to Taft College in California, and again, that was something again that, one of the recurring themes of my life is I didn't plan anything, and I think that that impacted me later on in life. But as a teenager,
what do you mean by you didn't plan it?
Well, I didn't really, I knew I was good at football. I didn't have any plans to go to play football. I think the one thing that brought my attention to football was one of the kids that was my backup got an offer to Wake Forest. And that irked me because I was the best player on the team. And I think it came down to I didn't do well on my SATs. I was one of those kids that kind of hung out in the hallways, didn't do what I was supposed to do. I was just a free spirit. And so college wasn't something I wanted to do. All my uncles were. So my goal was I was going to graduate high school and end up working with my uncles. And then, I did a summer thing with them and I realized being a mechanic wasn't what I wanted to do because, it hurt your hands.
You get all black and stuff.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you a question right there. So would you consider that lack of guidance? Because you were talented. But would you say that you didn't have anybody to really guide your talent?
No, I would say it was me being hard-headed, me being
stubborn.
Me being stubborn, me being, just kind of like, oh, I'll figure it out. Because I had plenty of people, my coach, I never forget, I had the coach from Missouri come out. I told you I used to hang out in the hallways. And I had a college recruiter come to the school. And it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then because my athletic director, he was upset with me. But I was in the hallway and the recruiter from Missouri came to the school. And I was supposed to be in my first period class. And so, of course, back then, they would let recruiters kind of walk the hallways. Now they can't do it, but back then they would let the recruiters walk the hallways. Mm-hmm. And so the recruiter went to my class and I wasn't there. So when he was walking back towards the office, I'm standing up against the locker talking to this girl. And he walked up to me and said, "Are you Milton Thornhill?" And of course, my first reaction was, "Yeah, who are you?" And so that's all, and that was all that
are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, that was all. That's all he said to me, and he went back to the athletic director and my high school coach and was like, we'll reconsider this one. We'll get back to you on this." So my probably about 5 minutes after I got in class, I got a note to come to his office, and he was irate. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What?" He said, "First of all, why weren't you in class when you're supposed to?" And I was like, I didn't have an answer. And then he was like, "Do you realize who you just talked to?" And I was like, "Who?" He was like, "That was the recruiter from University of Missouri. They came, they really liked you, but whatever you did, they said
come across very well." Yeah.
So
So why did you choose to attend a 2-year college over a 4-year college?
Honestly, Mr. Blake, I just picked a spot on the map. I just wanted to get far away from Woodbridge as I could, and I closed. And I knew I had to leave. I knew I had to leave the area because I was just doing. I wasn't a bad kid. I was just doing dumb stuff. And one thing that people don't realize about me is, my family left when I was a senior high school because my father was in the military, and I told him I didn't want to go to Italy, and so I stayed on my own between my aunt and my uncle's house my whole senior year. I worked my senior year. I was literally on my own for about 1.5 years. And after that experience, man, of being on my own and, just kind of seeing what it was like to be an adult, I knew that, it was cool being on my own, but being on your own means that you had to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that if I stayed in it, that I wasn't going to, it was just going to be a lot of the same, just nothing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we think things look cool or sound cool until we actually see it. And it's like, not what it is. So I just picked as far as places I could, which ended up being Taft, California.
Mm-hmm.
Junior college. Great experience, man. It really opened my eyes to how much talent was really. I was one of 2 kids from the state of Virginia, and the other kid was from my high school. He was a lineman, and he stayed for 2 weeks. But when I got there, Coach, it was they were flying kids in, they were, it was crazy. It was like we were fish in a small pond. Everybody was somebody. They flew this kid in from Florida by the name of Derek Love. I never forget. We ran the 40 yards, and most people run the 40-yard dash. We ran 400-yard sprints back and forth. Everybody out on the field. This kid jumped off the helicopter on 3 fields over. He comes over, runs the 400, and gets back on the helicopter. Everybody's like, "Who the hell was that?" Like, we all laid out, dead tired. Cat gets off the helicopter, runs the 400, and gets back on the helicopter, leaving. It was like, "Oh, that's Derek Love. He's the indoor 55-meter champ out of Florida." And it was like, "He coming here?" And it was like, "Yep." And everybody was like, "Oh, no." no. But just surrounded by talent, man. It was a great experience.
That was great experience. Yeah. So you went all the way out there, right? California, and then you came back this side, correct?
Yes, sir.
Ferrum. Is that how you say it? Ferrum?
Yes, sir. Ferrum College.
Yeah. I'm trying to understand the dynamics.
Yeah.
You went all the way out there, pretty much running away from home, if you want to put it like that, and then you end up coming right back.
Well, the reason I came back is because my grandfather was ill, and he had never seen me play before, so I just picked the spot where I could get as close to him as possible and spend as much time as I could with him and give him an opportunity to see me play. So Ferrum was about, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half from a little old place called Bedford, Good, Virginia. And that was another great choice, man, because Ferrum ended up being probably a lifesaver for me because I was going nowhere fast. Came from California, was supposed to go. Missouri was interested in me again. There was 2 or 3 other schools that was interested in me. And my best friend, who is my brother, Tommy Thigpen, was at Carolina, and I wanted to so bad go to Carolina because, again, I realized that I had screwed the pooch on just taking advantage of opportunities. And so Carolina was like, "Hey, we have our guy." And Natron Means, who ended up being a Hall of Fame, not a Hall of Fame, but a great college running back. And I understood it. Carolina has always had a great lineage of running backs. And so, that kind of humbled me a little bit. And so I just, tucked my tail and went as close as I could to my grandfather. And it actually rejuvenated my football career. I did well in junior college, but, in junior college, if you don't get that next step back to a Division I school, is considered a failure. And so that didn't happen.
Hold that thought right there, because I have that as a question to ask you too. But what was it when you compared the 2 colleges? What would you say that was different from Taft and Ferrum?
Well, Taft was basically, what it was. It was a school intended to get you in and get you out. But what Taft did for me was, Coach, it surrounded me with other, like I've always had good teammates, but Taft surrounded me where everybody was good. Offensively, defensively, you've seen college coaches coming in, you've seen kids getting flown in and flown out. Again, I was the only kid from Virginia. Everybody was from Texas, Hawaii, Florida, California. You had to have 2 Division I schools that was even interested in you before they even considered you. Here's a little name for you, since you're an Olympic guy. Does the name Harlan Davis ring a bell to you?
Yes.
So Harlan Davis was one of our receivers. They did not recruit receivers. Does the name Mike Platt ring a bell to you? Triple jumper.
What is that name?
So Michael Platt, Harlan Davis, and there was another kid that were all track runners. So our receiving crew came from our track team. They didn't recruit receivers. That junior college had 5 nationally ranked athletes on it, and 3 of them competed in the Olympics. Harlan Davis, of course, lost to Carl Lewis, 10th of a second in a 100-meter qualifier.
Yes, Carl Lewis.
Our star receiver. And Michael Platt was our slot receiver, who was either a qualifier or a medalist. I'm not sure. I don't want to be dishonest, but he was a very good triple jumper. But that was what type of talent we was around. Those were the guys we sit around and talk. And so when you're seeing like world-class athletes just around you all the time, and
absolutely that kind of rub off on you as whether you are or not, you just make you feel good, like you.
What ended up was I ended up training with these guys every day. You know, I'm out running because we didn't lift weights. We ran and we did resistance training. We was out in the hills running in California. You know, coach didn't believe in weights, and so when those guys were working out on the track team, my quarterback was a great athlete named Stacey McKinney from Florida, and he ran track. And so he would invite me out to come run track with those guys. So I was out there running track with those cats, and it just, you could see that these guys,
they were serious.
Even if they weren't serious about being in shape. You know, everybody was out there looking good. You know, I was this little cat. Everybody walking with their shirt off, and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, so Taft just surrounded me with tremendous talent, tremendous athletes, and everybody was going somewhere. And I realized very shortly that, damn, I'm not going nowhere. I'm just here. You know? And so what FARM gave me was a place where when I came back, I almost screwed the FARM opportunity up, to be honest. I went down to FARM to see my grandfather. The coaches wanted me to come and visit the campus, so I drove down. I watched the team practice through the fence, and I said to myself, I'm too damn good to be here. And I left. I left. I went and told, I went to see my grandfather again, and he was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm going back home. He was like, to do what? I don't know. So by the time I got from Lynchburg back to Woodbridge, my grandfather called my mom. My coach had called my mom because, of course, the coach from FARM was like, where is he at? He never showed up. And my coach asked me, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you tell me what the plan is. You know, what's the plan? And I'm just sitting there. He's like, you might be that good. He said, but where else are you going to go? He says, so if you really think you're that good, go prove that you're that good. And so a week later, I ended up, my mom, my aunt, and I believe my sister drove me back down to FARM. Told me, if you come back, I'm gonna whoop your behind. Like, and then when I got to FARM, the first person I met was, two of the first people I met was Chris Warren, who, if you know that name, Chris Warren is probably going into the Hall of Fame soon. And then Kevin Sherman, who is a college coach now. Those were the first two guys I met. They took me under their wingman, and the rest is, as they say, history, man.
Is that the time you really realized that you have the potential to make it to the NFL, or?
No, I don't think I ever, even now, I still don't feel I had the potential to make it to the NFL. I think it was just, one thing about the NFL, Coach, is one thing that I learned about it real quick is NFL is a business. And sometimes your talent doesn't define you. It's just right place, right time. So a lot of guys, man, that I seen, like when I was in, when I was in Tampa, man, I seen a lot of guys that should have made the team. And I didn't feel I didn't feel I deserved to be on the team. It was just, I got sandwiched between two names, Eric Rhett and Warrick Dunn. Imagine a kid from Virginia being in that situation. I wasn't highly touted, the reason that I got seen is Chris invited me to come out and just work out with him. And I was out running around with him on the field, had no idea he was trying out. And two teams at the time had interest in me. And one was, actually Carolina Panthers, who was, I think, a new franchise at the time, or up and coming franchise at the time. And somebody from Tampa liked me, and they offered me the opportunity. It was a guaranteed contract, come out and see what happens. And,
did you say a guaranteed contract?
No guaranteed contract.
What does that mean?
Just get out there and hope you, you get out there and hope you make it.
I hope you make it. Okay. And if you make it, then you're assigned a guaranteed contract.
Even then, there's still no guarantee. You know, they can sign you to no guarantees, like a year with no guarantees, no, you know, no bonuses, no structure, nothing like that. The NFL now is a lot different than what it was. But, you know, everything now in the NFL is based off of incentives and, you know, packages and stuff like that. But back then, man, it was just, you know, it was a little bit different. So for me, like the NFL experience, like I'm very grateful for it, but it wasn't the highlight. You know, you asked the question, did I realize I had the potential, or that I still don't, you know, I was just in the right place at the right time.